Boy, it's good to see all of you. The last time I looked out, there were only a small handful of people, and I don't know where the rest of you came from. But we're glad you're here. It's really good to see all of you. What a glorious, glorious day it is to be alive, right? Let's say that together. It's a glorious day to be alive. Joy. Eric mentioned the fact that we're going to sing a little children's song. I requested it, actually. It takes me back to my Sunday school days when we sang this song all the time, it felt like. And in the church where I used to serve in Port St. Lucie, we sang it fairly regularly. It's a favorite of mine. It always makes me feel joyful. And so, you know, I said in this slide, I don't know which one you're looking at, yeah, about the song we sang, because I thought we were going to sing it before the message when I created this slide, but it doesn't matter. We're going to sing it at the end of the message. You know the one. I have joy, 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 joy deep in my heart. I started that way too low. I cannot pull that off. How many of you recognize that little song? Yay. So I just want to talk about the lyrics for a second, because when we sing it, I want you to sing it mindfully and just be aware of the words that you're saying, if you don't mind. I want you to anchor yourselves in joy when you walk out the door today. So I have joy, joy, joy deep in my heart, because that's where it lives, deep, deep in our hearts. That's where joy lives. And then it says, the second verse is, I've got the peace that passeth understanding deep in my heart. Because that's where that matters. The fact that it lives deep in our hearts, you know. It's not just an idea. It's not fleeting. It lives here. And then I've got the love of Jesus deep in my heart. We're not talking about worshiping Jesus as a savior. We're talking about honoring Jesus, the master teacher, and the way that he lived his life. I love that. I love those stories because they lift me up and inspire me to live my own life just nearly as well, if I can. And then finally, the final verse, which I wasn't familiar with. I think in Sunday school we left it off, but I found it on the internet. And I found it according to the person who originally wrote the song, because someone has messed with the lyrics. And so if you go on the internet, you'll find different versions. But the original said this: for there is therefore now no condemnation deep in my heart. No condemnation deep in my heart. Boy, if that doesn't conjure up joy, I don't know what does. So that's the song we're talking about. And thank you, Eric, for putting it on the order of service. I am so grateful. So the question is, can we live in joy? Can we live in joy? Can we do it? Yes. Yes. Is it difficult? You know, after I decided to talk about joy, all kinds of information about joy made its way into my awareness during the course of the week. And I heard someone ask this question. You know, if you lived in Gaza, could you live in joy? We think it's difficult because we hear about it. You know, what if we lived in it? If we lived in the Ukraine, would it be difficult? Yeah, exceedingly difficult. We've got it pretty easy, friends. As hard as it is to hear about these things, you know, the truth is they're happening to other people. It's hard. It's hard because we're inundated daily with information about these things, aren't we? Wherever we go, it's impossible to avoid. Whether you listen to the news by intention, you know, if you do it mindfully, or whether you don't, there's no avoiding information about the chaos in the world, and it's global. It's global. We think things are chaotic in this country, and they are, but it's chaotic globally right now. You know, crazy things are happening all around the world. So it occurred to me that it was even more important maybe than ever before to just talk about joy, just talk about joy a little bit, just to remind you, to bring it back into your awareness, maybe to facilitate your renewal of the intention to do everything in your power to live in a place of joy, because it's always a choice. Truly, it is a choice, friends. You know that, right? You don't always want to hear that. You know, there are people that are, I feel fairly safe saying this too, who sometimes forget themselves and start to moan about circumstances. And I'm like, well, you know, you have a choice. You have a choice about how to be with that, But the answer to the question, can we live in joy, is a resounding yes, in my humble opinion. A resounding yes, we absolutely, positively can live in joy. So what is it? Let's make sure we're all on the same page. What is it? It's not happiness. There's a difference. It's not happiness. Because happiness is fleeting. Let me give you some examples. Do you get really, really, really excited, if you can remember, falling in love for the first time maybe, or the second or the third, whatever, I don't need to know. Does it not like make you feel woohoo, kind of crazy? A new car, woo, yeah. Jeannie's gone, yeah. She's had that experience a couple times. Or a good joke. You know, you get a really, really, really good belly laugh, or a new house, a new pet, a new anything, and you're happy, but then you lose the job. The thrill over the newness of the car wears off after a little while. The belly laugh goes away after a little while. The love, that over-the-top kind of love that you felt, it kind of settles down and finds a different kind of groove. Whereas your energy is maybe not right up here, it's down here. Thankfully, nice and steady. Happiness is fleeting. That's not what we're talking about. I like to think that joy, it's a matter of anchoring ourselves in the oneness of God, anchoring ourselves, opening up our hearts completely, hearts wide open, anchored in the oneness of God, anchored in our spiritual power. Joy is a spiritual power, and it's our birthright. I believe it's our natural way of being. We were designed to experience joy, I believe, and we can always choose to go back to it. Here's what it looks like. I don't know, are you all familiar with these two guys? I assume they're up there behind me. Okay, so you know these two guys? So back in 2015, His Holiness the Dalai Lama invited his best friend, Bishop Desmond Tutu, to come to Dharamsala and celebrate the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday. So do the math quickly. I said 2015. That was 10 years ago, which means the Dalai Lama is now 90. And of course, Desmond Tutu has passed. He was already suffering from cancer when he made the trip. So they met together in Dharamsala, the home of the Dalai Lama, and they spent a week. And they invited a dear friend of theirs, Douglas Abrams, to come and record the entire thing, follow them around, take pictures, capture their dialogue, capture the stories, all that kind of stuff. And Douglas did that, and then he created this book, The Book of Joy. And I love the cover so much because that is one of the coolest expressions of joy I've ever seen. There are pictures of these two world spiritual leaders, these icons, at least in my humble opinion, meeting on the tarmac of the little airport in Dharamsala. And the bishop comes down off of the plane with some help of his aides and walks over, and the Dalai Lama is waiting there. And Desmond goes like this. And the Dalai Lama had an interesting reaction. He kind of turned his head. And in the book, Douglas explains, well, if you've been raised by monks, and from the time you were born, how many kisses on the cheek do you think, or on the lips, have you ever gotten in your life? You know, I don't think he was accustomed to being kissed. At least that's what Douglas believed. But it's such an adorable picture. And for the entire week, they tease each other constantly. They giggle like children. I want to read just a little something from page 7 to share, to give you a sense of this. Douglas says that during the week, their fingers wagged at each other all the time, nonstop. Moments before their hands would be clasped together affectionately. He said during our first lunch, the Archbishop told a story of a talk that they gave when they were together at an event. And as they were getting ready to walk on stage at this event, the Dalai Lama, the world's icon of compassion and peace, pretended to reach over and choke Bishop Desmond Tutu with his hands. You know, great big smile on his face. He just reached up with his hands and pretended to choke him. At which point the bishop said, "Hey, the cameras are on us. Let's act like holy men." I love that. I love that. I love the joy that they exude. He said, these two men remind us that how we choose to act each day is what matters. Even holy men have to act like holy men, but how we think holy men act, serious and severe, pious and reserved, is hardly how these two greet the world. It's hardly how these two greet each other. The Archbishop has never claimed sainthood, and the Dalai Lama considers himself a simple monk. They offer us the reflection of real lives lived with pain and turmoil, in the midst of which they've been able to discover a level of peace, of courage, of joy that we can aspire to in our lives. Their desire for this book is not to convey their wisdom, but their humanity. Suffering is inevitable, they said, but how we respond to that suffering is our choice. Not even oppression or occupation can take away the freedom to choose our response. That's why they agreed to do the book. Live in joy. Live in joy. Giggle. Giggle. Tease. Kiss. Tickle. Do it all. And keep the heart open. The only way to experience joy is with an open heart. It is virtually impossible to experience it if your heart is closed. Impossible to experience it when your heart is closed. So right after I decided to talk about joy, these things always happen to me, and it's so cool. I got an announcement on a website that I follow, so it was in my news feed because I get news from them. I got an announcement that Pema Chodron was speaking in Colorado last month, July, as she does every year on her birthday. She was speaking in Colorado, and she rarely makes public appearances any longer. She's quite well. She's 89 years old. It was her 89th birthday. So I followed the link, and I went to the website, and it said the talk, which had already happened on July 29th, and this was like a week ago, was going to continue to be available on their website for 2 more days. So she spoke for 1 hour and 40 minutes. She looks great. She looks great. Some of you who know me, have done book studies with me, know how much I revere this woman. So she doesn't have much hair left. She's nearly bald, but she's very, very strong, very strong. So the camera, the live streaming begins, and they show her sitting in front of a gorgeous, some kind of a thing hanging on the wall. She's sitting in front of it. And she starts to giggle a little bit, and she says, excuse me, I'm going to stand up because I can't see those of you in the back, and I'm being told none of you can see me. So she stood up. And for an hour and 40 minutes, she stood up and spoke. She stood with confidence and poise and strength. She never wavered. So she opened her mouth and she started to talk, and she said, oh, excuse me one more time. They're telling me to move to the left, because the wall hanging behind her had two parts. And the part that was directly behind her was very dark, but the part over here to the left was very bright. So the lighting was better. So they asked her to move over, and she moved over. So that's how the whole thing began. And then she spoke about joy. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up, you know? I'm like, wow, wow, wow. An hour and 40 minutes. And she brought up a word I haven't heard in a very, very, very long time. This one. Remember the word killjoy? Does anybody use it anymore? I don't think I've heard anyone say killjoy like in decades. I don't know. How about you? Yeah? I hadn't thought about it in a very long time. But it's really appropriate when you're talking about joy, because the question is, what kills our joy? What things kill our joy? And so there were several hundred people in this big tent where she was speaking, one of those great big circus tent things. And she just asked people the question, and lots of people spoke. It went on forever. What kills your joy? So I'm going to ask you, what kills your joy? What kills your joy? Worry. Rude drivers that cut me off. She said, I didn't, but it's true for me too. What else? Fear. Fear. I think all of it comes down to fear. Physical discomfort. Yeah, it's really hard to be in joy when you are physically uncomfortable, when you are in pain, physical pain. I think most of you know I work at Silent Unity, and I think most of the calls we get have to do with healing, prayers for healing. And most of the callers are in physical pain. And sometimes it's palpable. They're in so much pain that you can almost feel it, you know, just engaging with them. So it's tough if you're in physical pain to experience joy. Polarization, she says. Well, she didn't call it that. She said, when we set up boundaries between us and other people, any kind of boundary between us and other people, unless, of course, we're doing it for safety's sake, for survival. When we set up boundaries between ourselves and other people, it's really difficult to experience joy. And if you look at every one of those, you realize that what's happening when you set up those boundaries or you're having physical discomfort is your heart is closed. Check it out if you don't understand what I'm saying. The next time you feel disconnected from joy, I assure you, you're going to find your heart is not open. You know when your heart is open, you feel expansive. You feel one with the universe. You feel that peace that passeth understanding, because it's nearly impossible to describe. But that's what happens when the heart is open. The heart has to be open. So what do we want to do? What do we want to do? What can we do? What can we do to assure that we experience joy when we want to? There are several things that I want to mention, and you have more, I'm sure. Keep your heart open. Keep your heart open. Do whatever it takes to open up your heart so that you can feel joy. Call out your tenderness. I mentioned earlier that it might be really difficult to experience joy if you live in Gaza or Ukraine. I can only imagine. But Pema suggested to all of those people that perhaps, just simply realizing that they are not alone, that they are suffering alongside of a whole lot of other people in the same situation. Just simply identifying with something bigger than themselves, in this case, other people. When you're experiencing pain, real bad pain, if you can in that moment realize that there are millions of people on the planet suffering that same kind of pain in the very same moment you are, truly think about it. If there are, 6 billion of us, that means there are a couple million probably feeling pain at any given moment in time. Think about that when you're feeling pain. Oh, me and all of those others. I can relate, I can identify. I am not alone in this experience. And all of a sudden, your heart starts to open up, because that's how we're hardwired, friends. We're hardwired for compassion and kindness and oneness. We're hardwired for those things. So the moment we step outside of our little tiny self and identify with others, our heart automatically begins to open up. Let me read one more passage from this beautiful book that demonstrates this point. It's a little difficult with a microphone in your hand to manage these papers, but I'm managing. Hold on. All right. The Dalai Lama, during the course of the week, mentioned a famous Buddhist story of a woman who lost her child. She was inconsolable in her grief, carrying her dead child throughout the land, begging for someone to help heal that child. When she came to the Buddha, she begged him to help her. He told her he could help her if she would collect mustard seeds for the medicine. She eagerly agreed, of course. But then the Buddha explained that the mustard seeds needed to come from a house that had not been touched by death. When the woman visited each house in search of the mustard seeds, she found there was no house, not one single house, that had not suffered the loss of a person, a spouse, a child. Seeing that her suffering was not unique, she was able to bury her child in the forest and release her grief. Douglas, who wrote this book, says, my friend Gordon Wheeler, who's a psychologist, explains that grief is a reminder of the depth of our love. Without love, there is no grief. When we feel grief, uncomfortable and aching as it might be, it's actually a reminder of the beauty of that love. The moment we associate with others who've had that experience or are having that experience, our heart opens, because that's how we're hardwired. We are hardwired to love, to be love. We are hardwired to be kind and compassionate. It doesn't take much to open up our hearts. And then the other thing is, when you're feeling less than joyful because of the news, keep your eye on the big picture. Please, keep your eye on the big picture. Some people say to me sometimes, how do you handle this and still be joyful? Because I strive to practice joy every day in my life, and I don't do too badly. I miss the mark regularly, but it's only temporary, as my friend Ellen would say. It's only temporary. And I say to them, because I keep my eye on the big picture. We say in Unity, there's only one power, right? Right? God. And what is God? God is goodness. And goodness always, always prevails. Always. However long it might take to outpicture, whatever means it might necessitate to get there, you can be assured that goodness prevails. So keep your eye on the big picture. Sometimes this craziness is necessary for old ways of thinking and old ways of being and old ways of doing business need to crumble and make way for oneness, right? Keep your eye on the big picture because we're needed. We're needed. We're just needed to demonstrate it in our lives every day. People watch, right? Your grandchildren watch. Your neighbors watch. Your friends watch. The people you work with watch. We're needed to demonstrate that joy is possible when we keep our hearts open, when we stay focused on the big picture. And let me leave you with my favorite affirmation. I just realized I said that, and I'm not sure it is. It's one of them. I like it a lot. Is that authentic enough? I like it a lot, and it's one I share with people a lot when they call for prayer. God is greater than any fear. Say it. God is greater than any fear. Use it to help you open up your heart. Thank you, and God bless you.